Hello and welcome to another episode of Technology Heroes Unplugged at Capital Club Dubai, where today we'll be discussing culture and digital. With digital transformation pushing the boundaries of the art of the possible and markets achieving record results in 2020, some of us, though, are a little tired of all those endless video calls, of all those scheduled meetings, and seeing bonding at work now being very virtual on a meeting place. Culture, however, isn't a mantra only for successful technology billionaires. Culture is very much in the DNA of decision-making that leaders will be making in our choices for our recovery. It is therefore a privilege to have with us today three leaders who drive organizations towards digital and technology solutions for customers in the region. They are Yuri Misnik, the Group CTO of First Abu Dhabi Bank, Eleni Kitra, Global Business Head of Automotive at Facebook, and Umar Khan, the SVP of Special Projects at Injazat, a G42 company, an AI and cloud powerhouse in the region. Welcome to all of you. It's great to get this dialogue with you on culture and all things beyond. And thanks for making the time in the rush towards Christmas too. If I can just take a few minutes to set the scene. It's been a strange old world this year. Some industries have slipped, and some, like payments, have rocketed, with PayPal achieving almost 70 million new customers in 2020. Amazon's also reported Q3 profits revenues are up 37% at almost $96 billion US. And Netflix, my personal favorite, and I'm sure yours too, is heading for 30 million new subscribers this year, inching ever closer to that magical 200 million number as a total user base. So, despite all the economic disruption this year, there's clearly been a pivot towards digital transformation and digital products in how consumer behavior now reacts and works. So, being a little controversial now, are we seeing that with this superb growth that we've seen across technology in all forms, that culture itself is beginning to become diluted, where transparent and empowered decisions for change are becoming more ambiguous in that drive towards digital, where innovation is less democratic and organizational silos are becoming more difficult to level as cultural divides grow? Or is candor and creativity and empowerment very much alive and well in the region and across the world? Okay, so with that, I'd like to turn to yourself, Yuri. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to open up the discussion with yourself. As Group CTO, you lead one of the largest digital innovation technology agendas in the region with First Abu Dhabi Bank. You're also no stranger to change. You've experienced the revolution of Glasnost in Russia, and then you've gone on to run leadership in the UK, Australia, and now in the UAE. So Yuri, how do you see culture being relevant in making digital choices today?
Thanks, Navid. And it's actually really good to be here and speaking live first time now, so which is wonderful. I want to say a few things. One is I want to start with the quote of a very, very famous person in the marketing space called Peter Drucker, which probably lots of people know. It says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And I think it's even more important, it's more critical in the digital space, where we've seen lots of interesting attempts, especially in financial services across the world, of big companies trying to become digital, trying to do things differently, and not always succeeding as much as they wanted to succeed. And I think that a majority of many reasons why they were sort of not progressing as well as they should is because they failed to change and they failed to adjust the cultural elements of the organization, the cultural DNA of the organization. And also, I was lucky enough to work for Amazon, and it was an interesting experience for me, and I'll probably be coming to that a lot, because I do believe that, and if you actually talk to true Amazonians, people who've been there for 15, 20 more years, a lot of them are coming to the very, very simple thing, is that the leadership in Amazon, and a lot of people believe that the reason for success of the company, as you mentioned, they're growing and they've been quite meaningfully fighting the COVID disruption, is that the leadership principles, which were set up, which were embedded into not just in the set of PowerPoint slides or marketing materials, but it's actually embedded in everyday decisioning of every person, in the performance metrics, in the performance conversations, in the every meeting. And so if also coming to the sort of trying to summarize things is, I do believe that in a digital world, the right culture and the cultural transformation is probably even more important than technology transformation or business transformation, because that's the fundamental cornerstone of what you're doing. And making the right culture, we can talk about what right is wrong, is making the right culture embedded into everyday decision making, into everyday behaviors of your team. That's where it becomes super, super important, super critical. Without this, I don't believe that in a digital era you will succeed.
So it's very much relevant.
Yes.
It's very much relevant.
It's a very short answer to the question.
Amazonian references are good. I particularly love the fact, and I've only read about this, haven't worked with Amazon, but apparently they would run meetings with the word memo given out to all their executives to read for the first 15, 20 minutes and then ask questions after they'd actually understood the content, which I thought was great, because too often some of us have been in meetings where no one's read the deck that's been sent out to everyone to actually look at.
And there's a very interesting point about this, is that it's super hard to do it for the first few times, because it's unnatural for a group of 15, 20 people in a room, sit down quietly and read 5 pages and a bunch of appendices, which is typically attached to that. So absolutely, but once you get into the mode, I think it definitely is one of the things which helps make better decisions, help more productive discussions, essentially removes or gets everyone on the same page and removes unclarity, which typically stick in the PowerPoint. So yes, that's
no, 96 billion of revenue in Q3 isn't bad at all for Amazon. So moving on from Amazon, Umar, I'd like to turn to you for the second question then. You perpetuate the modern era digital warrior. You've been back and forth between London and Abu Dhabi this year. But not many people know this, but you were also very brave in taking a step almost 10 years ago in setting up your own regional airline as well, and running that for a while, before jumping into innovation in financial leadership in the region. And now you're at Injazat, where you're working with G42 in driving cloud and, dare I say, many other solutions, and dealing with all manner of change that Yuri was referring to earlier. How do you see culture being relevant then in how we not just make it an intangible, but actually address that with more candor and objectivity in making choices that are right for the organization?
So thanks, Naveed, first of all, for having me here. Great question. And look, I've been in the region, or I've worked with the region for the last 12 years or so. Consulting, aviation, banking, and now deep technology. What I can see and say, massive confidence, is that culture beats strategy every time, as Yuri said. Culture beats agendas, it beats tactics every time. Culture, if you get to your goal, it's because of culture as an organization. And if you don't, it's because of culture. So to answer your question, I think when you're part of an organization, you have one of two choices. One is that you join the organization, or you interact with the organization and you embrace the existing culture and you amplify it, right? Or you make the real change, which is the hard change, and that's cultural change, because that's where the magic happens. So what I mean by that is that it's great to, and this happens as cultures become a buzzword, as so many other things I play with, innovation, digital, and all the buzzwords, is that it's easy for organizations who are particularly going through transformation, so I work a lot in transformation, and romanticizing about the culture of Google, Spotify, Netflix, as I can see on your table there. Yeah. And look, it's great to rub shoulders with the big boys and girls. It's great to be ambitious and look at lessons learned. But ultimately, culture, in my experience, for it to really work, for it to be that secret sauce that provides that rocket fuel, has got to be highly personalized to the organization. Because here in the region, we are a melting pot of cultures, religions, faith, races, and skill sets, and it goes on. And we at times are at the bleeding edge of technology, and sometimes we're at the back end of it. And that's all culture. So where we want things to really happen, where we want things to really change, we have to move beyond the superficial lip service and PowerPoint decks and things like that, because culture is amorphous, right? It's not easy to draw a ring around it and say, this is what it is. You can't put it on a spreadsheet and say, this is what the return is. Well, you can, but it's not easy to do. But that, I believe, certainly in my experiences, that is a challenge to be solved for the better. Because you can solve that problem, you can look at it and say, well, this is my organization, how does this work? A little bit like a well-fitted suit, right? If you have a tailor-made suit, it will look great on someone else. But if you put that suit on yourself, the arms will be too short or they'll be too long. So with culture, it's really got to be highly personalized. And of course, it's fundamentally critical to success, particularly in this region.
Okay, so several points there. I think I definitely took away the highly personalized aspect. Eleni, highly personalized, melting pot of cultures in Dubai, many nationalities, many languages, so much sensitivity, and yet we're working from home. You're sitting here representing probably the most attractive aspect of industry today, which is big tech. Many of us have followed the fortunes of big tech this year, and many of them have reached giddying heights, which are very impressive. If I turn to you with the same question, just to sort of plug Facebook here, there are approximately 7.8 billion as a population number for humans in the world today. And yet you as Facebook and your brands have managed to capture the eyeballs of almost 2.7 billion of them. Correct me if I'm wrong, okay? So you're not doing bad at all. And you're also helping shape many platforms for how many regions and countries are, to the point that Laura made, are looking for personalized content as well. So how do you see culture, though, beginning to become relevant as well in driving those digital outcomes?
So I will start from what Yuri said before about who eats who for breakfast.
Yeah.
And I will say, why don't we put them together and have breakfast together or a brunch because we're in Dubai. So let's put strategy and culture together and see what kind of a conversation they can have in a way to make this, more fruitful and more, to the benefit of the people they are addressing to. We talk about culture and we all talk about culture. It's a very trendy term, by the way, and we see a lot of also different roles coming up, like chief wellness officer and culture, D&I, and all this kind of abbreviation that we probably do not understand, all of us. So it's not something that everyone understands. If we break culture in the 2+1 elements, culture is the diversity part, which is about recognizing and respecting all the differences between people, visible and not visible, and what they bring on the table because they bring these diverse opinions. It's about inclusion, which is making the people feel that where they are, they belong, they're part of that. And it's also equity. This came up, by the way, by the latest Stanford report about their plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And equity is about, giving the opportunity to people who have the same opportunities, the same equal pay, same opportunity to be promoted. So you don't have only diverse opinions and aspects and include people. It's how you can actually treat all these people in a way that is very equally amongst them. The moment you're able to nail those three elements, you start creating a culture which is specific for each company, because it cannot be the same for a traditional company, for a technology company, or a small business. However, culture is about people coming on the table and they're respected to be heard. And if what they bring on the table is of value, then this could be part of the execution, the success of a company. And especially in this country that we are right now, which is a melting pot or a hot pot, if we don't do that, then we're all living in a silo. I'm coming from a very small country, and when I came to the country, I felt completely out of my water, okay? But I managed, and the whole system managed to keep me into that and make me feel one of the people in the company, in the country, in the ecosystem, and feel that I belong and not that I'm excluded in a country which is not my home country.
So in terms of your own perspective, though, of where culture is today, just to go back to the question as well, are you saying that culture is very much at the forefront of discussions that are going on today in technology?
It is and should be.
For change.
For change.
Go on.
Can I jump in a little bit,
sure.
right? And I really like what you said about the elements of equity, feeling of belonging, etc. And I think this is especially for the UAE native companies, right? Sort of G42, FAB, other banks here, right? I mean, Facebook has a little bit more like global reach, and you have not a little bit, much more global reach. Right?
A little bit.
But if you think about the local, I think that the biggest challenge, which especially in technology, which we need to go through right now, is to figure out, because we used to depend on consultancies. We used to have a way of working where we bring up people from outside to help, and they're coming in. We're paying some, whether it's consultants and whether it's system integrators, whether it's sort of somebody, but we tend to sort of bring them in, and sort of after they do the work, we tend to say, okay, thank you very much. We don't need you anymore, and sort of. It's super hard, and I think for us to succeed in this country, we need to sort of change this mentality where we create much more stickier workforce in our companies who feel that they belong, who feel that they own the outcome, and they feel that they own the results, and behave this way. And this is the only way to get all these three pillars which you're talking about sort of working. Because otherwise, like, why would I care if I'm only here to do my work, get my hourly rate, and then sort of go do something else?
But to Eleni's point on having equity in the organization, where you feel the culture belongs to you as well.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay?
exactly.
And you feel the culture belongs to you.
But if it only can belong to you, if you belong to the organization, if you feel belonging to the organization as well, right? So it's sort of transient quality.
Sometimes I say culture over perks or benefits.
Okay.
And I say that because we live in a country where, especially the people that were here and were expats, we have a lot of perks and benefits, and people from other countries, they say, oh my God, you have a great life over there. But you don't stick to a company, you don't stick to an organization just because you have a good, let's say, salary or a good house allowance. You stick because you want to be next to Omar, and I want to see him every day, either physically, because in the past, but now, through these boring VCs. But I still trust him.
Yeah.
I still feel he's close to me, and we support each other, and that our ideas are equal to each other as long as we go to the same direction, the same goal.
So good points, all saying this, pretty much the same thing, which is change is very much something you're working on. You've got to be mindful of the local cultural environment in terms of how you adapt. But the key thing is that's coming out again is from your point of view as well, Eleni, is this inclusion. Looking at your own organization and feeling you've got equity in the organization because you influence the culture and the outcomes.
And just to add to that, just to interject here, picking up what Eleni said, and very interesting what Yuri said, in my previous organization, I was part of the culture steering committee where we were changing the culture of the bank.
Which is, by the way, what Eleni does at Facebook.
Yeah.
Fantastic. We actually made a deliberate decision not to hire consultants. And the reason behind this was the culture had to be something that came from within. It had to be organic, right? So it consisted of a series of, we'll talk later about culture by design and intention, which I'm very passionate about. But essentially, we had to go through the organization and understand who did we have and who were we playing with. It was no good bringing in your top tier consultants to come in and give us an amazing strategy and then leave, and then getting people who didn't quite understand it or it didn't quite fit well to say, boys and girls, run with this. So we did it the other way around.
Yeah.
We got those personnel, we got the people who were the feet on the street, the people who actually did the work, the people who actually make the decisions to say, come on in, let's play together. Tell me what's important about you, what do you value, what's your vision? Tell me about your work-life balance, tell me what's important to you. So within our culture there, we actually baked in our why. And that why was like rocket fuel. That was why we as an organization were as successful as we were, and the rest is history where we went with it. So having the right people to drive that culture change is critical. And people often, because culture can be seen as either misperceived, and sometimes just not understood because I'm not important enough. It's HR's problem. It often falls in that bucket. But when it's well understood, it makes all the difference, particularly in technological organizations. Because in technological organizations, and technology all my life through the different industries, that is where you have the most silos. Even now, I'm going through a large transformation, leading large transformation, where we've got multiple different teams across different continents. And is it my job? Is it your job? Well, it doesn't say that on the SOP, so I'm going to stand here and I'm going to watch it on the floor while it crashes. It doesn't work like that. Again, it comes down to culture. Culture of ownership, responsibility. And one of the things that we as leaders need to advocate more is to take more responsibility and give more credit. Something that in this region that we need to work on as a group, as a team.
Oh no, but it's actually the other point. It's not just that. I think it's also we as an industry altogether, industries, probably all industries altogether, we are super bad at embedding culture. Apart from the obvious things like your diversity metrics or your even measuring inclusion is a disaster if you actually start putting
KPIs are difficult
things to it. But we are super bad at figuring out how to make sure we reward the right. So we all agree that culture is more important than strategy. Culture sometimes is more important than your immediate execution because that sets you up for the long term. But we're super bad at rewarding and measuring and embedding the culture into your performance metrics.
Absolutely.
At the end of the year, whether it's in banking, whether it's in technology, you probably have your own fair share of challenges there, right? And all my previous tech companies was exactly the same stuff. And I think that's an interesting question because no one sort of solved it super well yet.
So I think if I melt everything you all just said, not into the melting pot, but into the discussion leading up to my next question, which is actually about talent and the Netflix Keepers test. I'll come to that in a minute. What I do want to do is I do want to reflect on what you just said, which is the challenges are not just in this region, but globally at times. When you look at the bell curve of the profile of an organization, this is just from my experience, as brief as it's been, typically speaking, your innovators like Mark Zuckerberg, your innovators like Jeff Bezos, your innovators like Satya Nadella, typically sit in the 10% at the other end of the bell curve. And you've got this massive ocean of 70 to 80% in the middle who are largely, I hate to say this, but mediocre, indifferent. They don't truly understand what the innovator is saying some days. And you've got the followers in the tip. Not trying to be too controversial by saying this, but that's the dilemma or the dichotomy of how culture ends up being swallowed on a spreadsheet sometimes because it doesn't always immediately show up in numbers. Okay? Now, too much time on the first question, right? Perspective that probably will remain with you for the other points. Yuri, I want to turn to you with the keeper test. So I've got a book here, okay? So No Rules by Reed Hastings. I will plug this book at length in this episode. But essentially, it's one of the best books I've read on culture across organizations. So it's one where Reed builds on his lessons. Now, Netflix was founded in 1997. He builds on his lessons from 1997 on how does he understand talent and reward talent or deal with bringing in talent or even exiting talent, right? He talks about his generous severance package that if you are not the right talent, he will look at his organization and say, let's give this person 4 to 6 months, good severance, generous severance, help them even move out of the organization, but let's bring the right people in that fit in the culture, okay? And they're not doing too badly at all in terms of how they've seen results grow with streaming. So the keeper test builds on the famous Netflix culture deck, which is now captured in this book, which basically is about how managers say to themselves, which of my people, if they told me they were leaving for a similar job at a competitor or peer company, would I fight hard to keep? So with that in mind, Yuri, as you know too well, people and talent is a very, very valuable commodity, especially in the times that we live in, and the flexibility that they have as well. How do you see the keeper test playing out for digital outcomes and helping grow talent in the region?
It was an interesting question, and maybe I want to even reflect back to your previous comment about the bell curve and where people. We're moving, and there's an interesting book about the fourth industrial revolution, and there's a big movement around that. But if you read it, there's an interesting comment about the fact that in your procedural traditional economy, your best performers, like super good performers, are typically 2 times, 3 times productive than your average performer. So whoever is on the right side of your bell curve are doing twice more stuff, whatever stuff is, right? And if you're going into the knowledge-based economy, it's essentially what is fourth industrial revolution is about: automation, knowledge-based, knowledge-driven things. Your best performance on the right side of this bell curve, they're producing 10 times more than average performance. And I think the fundamental problem we have, and how do we capture and grow these 10xers in our environment, and how do we identify them? Because there's 2 things. I mean, looking at the bank, this is my job every day, right? I want to build the best technology team in financial services in the region. And we made some good steps towards getting it, and mostly not from actually repeating what we've done always, but from looking outside. So we bring people from Microsoft, from Amazon, from other banks which we believe did great, etc., and other technology industries, right? So I think that's super critical. And for me, the industry I'm in, right, and might be slightly different for others. It hasn't been massively disrupted, but it's starting to be disrupted more and more and more. We think about fintech, thinking about all the big tech, which is starting to play in these things. And for me, the next 3-4 years will be a massive acceleration and massive transformation, although I don't like the word. And I won't be able to do it with the traditional people who are good, who are a little bit better than others. I have to have a workforce which is focusing on this 10x multiplier, so people who actually do much more than others. And in this case, the philosophy of attracting them becomes very different. It becomes not only, does it fit into my range of pays? Does it actually do I want these people? Do I need this person? The second interesting point in terms of do I want, if I'm seeing that this person works as my competitor, should I actually do things to attract this person? So we're starting to behave a bit more like a technology or the big tech industry, right? Where I would prefer this person to work for me because it gives me an advantage to get more digital, to get more technology, to get more innovation through that. So from my perspective, if we want to, especially within industries which are going through this big disruption, without this, and that links to your keepers test, right? Effectively, that's the same thing in terms of would I keep this person.
So speed is becoming more and more. I know at Lab you were a big proponent of speed as well.
I think speed and the volume or ability to do many things at once, and ability to be, and these people on the right side of the bell curve, this is the ones you want to keep.
Yeah.
And typically, this is the people who are much more agile. They can pivot. They can react to response. They want own things. They see outcome as what they want to achieve, not the process, not just the procedural type of things. And without them, I think we won't succeed. And again, living where we are living, it is a challenge for us to build the environments, to build the organizations here, which will attract this type of people.
I think there's so much in there with the 10x that you mentioned already of the people on the right-hand side of the bell curve that we all hope to work with and have in our teams. But you're right, in terms of the change that the region's looking to drive going forward into next year, especially for our recovery, you do need more of those disruptors that sit on the right-hand side of the bell curve. And yes, they will be 10 times more productive, but they will also be 10 times more opinionated as well at times. They will have opinions which may take time for the enterprise to understand, particularly if, and I'm going to say this, at times you've been very process-oriented in how they've looked at the CFO being able to drive behavior in the organization.
But isn't it the whole point of you want to hire people who are smarter than you?
Absolutely.
Why would I want to work? Why would I want to have a team who would essentially take everything which I say and do it? I mean, I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. And I think this is the biggest philosophical change which we have to get through. That is that this has to change.
Absolutely, and I think to add, one of the reasons that large companies fail isn't because of reckless people. It's because of fearful people that don't speak up, people that don't bring an idea in, people that don't want to disrupt the status quo.
Or they're not encouraged to understand risk can have benefits. Their metrics drive them towards this behavior at times in big organizations that they will hide behind the process.
I'm so glad you said that because that's culture. When we look at metrics, we look at KPIs, we look at your why. Ultimately, that comes down to culture, right? And how are you selling the opportunity? And there was a point you made earlier, I want to slightly challenge it, if I may, about the bell curve as well, but I have a slightly different view in that I actually don't think the innovators sit at the fringes. I think that is a misconception, and again, by fear of people not really understanding what innovation is. So in my last role at the bank, I was SVP of innovation there, and one of my personal missions became helping people to understand that innovation isn't me, because it's not one person isn't going to create a movement. Many people create a movement, and that consisted of roadshows, workshops, telling people what can you do in your area of risk, right? For example, so risk in an area of banking is an area that's you've got very little room for leeway. You want to be careful what you innovate there. But what can you do to innovate? What can you do to innovate with your team? When you democratize things like innovation, you begin to bring people closer to say, actually, I want to push the envelope a bit. I want to experiment a bit. And that's what will make your organization go up that 10x. So it's that old saying, rising tides raise all boats, right? Because alone, no CEO, no top director is going to be able to lead the company or change it. Yes, they will spearhead the movement, but as much as we have those that are, companies that haven't moved quick enough, you have certain leaders who try and move too quick. And when you don't take your people with you, you have that disparity and you have that gap. So that again is where the culture comes in, and that again is where you have to democratize things like innovation. And again, that has to feed and be baked into the culture.
So good points. I'm going to ask you again though, keeper test is alive and well. Talent is very much a focus then. In summary, what would be your opinion?
Absolutely. So with the keeper test, one of the things I'd say is I'd probably look back a little bit and zoom out and say that by the time you're looking to offer someone a retention package to stay, the damage is already done, right? So I would look back at, say, the organizational design, look at the hiring manager and understand that, what was the basis on, or what is the basis on which we hire people? And this is a change that I'm looking at right now in the place I'm working at. And, leading organizations, the ones really at the fringes now, they assume that most people that come through onto the desk, CVs that come through, they are qualified enough, What they look for is cultural fit. And do you fit? It doesn't matter if you've got a PhD from the top university, but do you culturally fit? Because if you don't, not only are you going to not work out, but you're going to be a detractor. And you're going to create a tribe, and you're going to create a tribe of non-followers, and that's not what you want. So keeper test has value, of course it does. But I would suggest that we have to look beyond that and look at how we hire them, because that amount that you're going to pay that person or people to stay on, if you invest that for upfront for coffee meetings or whatever you may have, or Zoom calls, just to get to know somebody, what do they like, what's important to them, what's important about their life, spend that 20 minutes, might save you $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 on a...
You normally know in the first 5 minutes.
I don't want to hijack it, but I just want a quick, very 2 seconds comment. The other aspect of the skipper test is that it makes you think because good people usually leave, they go somewhere, but they also leave because the organization which they work, actually stopped adding value to them, whatever this value is. It could be they stopped understanding getting anything back from cultural, from interactions, from business, from technology. So I think the good question of the skipper test is, if somebody really good is leaving you, what happens so that this person stop receiving value from the organization he or she works in?
So actually, we're going to turn to you now. So let me over to you.
There's no diversity in opinions here.
There you go.
No. Because we talk about how people can fit in the culture or the business operation or the goal of a company, we need to put another element here, which is about, do they fit now or do they fit for the future? Because sometimes when we see only for how someone can fit now in a company, maybe we have a bias about how we see the rest of the ecosystem in our company work, and we need someone to be complementing this. Actually, we want someone or more people to come and take this, what happens right now, in an evolution and progress to where we want to be. And sometimes someone who is not culturally fitting or corporate fitting in the system can be the one to drive the transformation for a company and organization.
Totally agree.
And this sometimes is what we need to think about, how you create, I don't like process in the very strict way, but I like when you have some kind of a framework, how you make happen that you take out the bias that I currently have, and I say, okay, these 3 guys are my friends, so we want someone who can be just like them. No, you want someone who can be different, and actually hack the existing culture to something you want to be in the next 5 to 10 years. This is when you can have people who you may want to keep them, but also they will want to stay. And they will be your talent. We're going to drive the company to the next level. And this is where the transformation is coming as well.
So I'm going to add to the Facebook perspective, which is very valuable, with a story again from Reed Hastings. So Reed Hastings says a good quarter for him to build on everything you all just said about being a square in a round hole, and being able to drive value from the square in the round hole and retain the right talent, is he says a good quarter for me is if Joe's made all the decisions and I've just been a bystander, just encouraging and cheering the team on in making decisions because the talent's working.
Exactly.
So if you look at the House of Cards story, okay, so I'm going to mention this because I did read this and was impressed. A few years ago, 2010, when Joe was out negotiating House of Cards for a record $100 million, he did it without talking to Reed. He actually nailed down 2 series all on his own without asking Reed, can I do this? And offered $100 million for that opportunity. And I think all of us have been online and watched it a few times. So it goes to show what empowerment and the right talent in the Keeper's Test does. So conscious of time in terms of how we move on, I've got 1 or 2 other questions to raise on culture, but I'm going to move away from the Keeper's Test. Change. Change is constant, okay? We don't want to end up with a Blockbuster moment. We don't end up with a Nokia moment as Steve Jobs starts launching an iPhone. And we certainly don't want to end up with a Kodak moment either. So change is constant. But in this world where suddenly double-digit digital growth is very, very achievable now, and we've all seen how Square have been phenomenal this year in their growth as well. How are we really sure that as we approach the concept of change, a diversity of opinion is possible? So, Yuri, what do you think?
I absolutely think that diversity of opinion is possible, and I think the diversity of opinion is critical for the change to continue. And from my perspective, diversity of opinion and also sort of the healthy arguments in the boardroom, in the meeting room, in the business, they sort of they address a lot of things which you talked about. Diversity of opinions, diversity of fit, diversity of approach, etc., etc. And I'm coming back to sort of, again, if you think about it, Amazon and Jeff Bezos has the whole famous thing about day one, and sort of what is day one and what is day two. And essentially, from my perspective, this is the only way to keep the company in this day one state, right? Where you have people with a fresh perspective, with a fresh mindset, and prepared to vocally and meaningfully bring up different opinions. And this is not I think the trick here, and again, probably coming from the same Netflix, the other Netflix book from, which was, I don't actually remember what was the name of it, but Patsy did it before as her HR officer from Netflix.
I know what you're talking about.
I don't remember the name of the book. But what I was talking about is that creating this culture where people can respectfully and openly criticize or challenge
in the interest
others
of the organization.
In the interest of the organization, of course, right? They're comparing Amazon and Yahoo, where in Yahoo everyone was encouraged to be friendly to each other and support each other, whether in Netflix people are encouraged to actually openly say what they like and what they don't like in a nice, polite, constructive way. I think that's a super important thing to have, and that sort of.
Can I add something
Sure.
here, which is very simple? I think we need to demystify the word change, or the word, or the notion of diverse opinions. Because the moment we think of these, that they're happening because they're happening in our everyday life,
Yeah.
in our families. In our families, I think if you have kids and a husband or a wife or any kind of partner, you have diverse opinions in how to run your home. The same applies for a company. So the moment you demystify and you think this is a given and should be coming organically in the organization, then someone will speak up very easily and say, okay, I have an opinion. It's good? Yes. It's not good? Again, yes. So when you feel comfortable in your own skin to express what you think, but there are rules about what is the goal, it is very clear what are the values of a company and what is the goal of a company, then you know how all these different opinions and ideas can come up to morph the final plan. But you have given respect to the people and at the same time accountability, because I say an opinion, but I need to be accountable, that I know that what I say, I know how to support. And if I'm going to be, executing, I know how to execute it.
And I want to add this thing about actually, a great point comes to mind in terms of again, Amazon principles, disagree and commit, which a lot of people are quoting right now. But the whole point here is that it's not like your team needs to disagree and commit to your decision.
Yeah.
In many cases, it's the other way around, where you're talking to your team and somebody from your team is saying things different from what you think is right. You need to be prepared and you need to be absolutely fine with saying, okay, I disagree with what you're saying, but you close to the ground, you have more facts, so let's do it your way. And at never point of time, wrong English, I will not come back to you and tell you that, I told you so. Yeah. Right? I think that's super important. So it's not just how well people underneath are discussing and then the boss makes a decision. It's figuring out how to create this culture of disagreeing committee across the organization, across the layers. Yes.
It's collaboration.
That point is, Yuri, is really interesting. It's something that I'm advocating at the moment, and we call it farming for dissonance. So I've got an idea. Here's what I think we need to do. Put it on the table. Half the room will say yes. The other half will be in fractions and say no. But it's the opportunity for people to say, why is it no? And let's fight it out here, let's fight it out, let's work it out, let's give people the opportunity to change it now. But once we walk out of here, once we sign off on this, once we say we're going to run with this, we run with this. There is no back chat, there's no I told him so, I told her so, she was going to be rubbish, I knew it was going to fail. That culture, unfortunately, exists and it's rife here. It is absolutely rife. But to push that out, it's harder to push it, you have to pull it, in the sense that you have to lead people to show them what better looks like. Now, better isn't perfect, but better is better than it was before. And again, it goes back to that incremental changes for a larger, bigger delivery that gets you to where you want.
I think there's one other elephant in the room, which we won't get into now, but we are living in a city and in a country where at times the parameters of how we operate and work in the UAE with our working contracts also poses a challenge for at times differences of opinions to be shared and aired, because people are thinking, you know what, I've got to stay quiet in this meeting if I want to keep my job. That's a fact. Okay? Too many times I've been in those meetings where people don't share an opinion because they're actually thinking, I want to keep my job. And I think as we look at how the right working models and right working dynamics should kick in to allow culture to drive the right behavior, what's right for the organization, I do believe we ought to look at how we all work together as well with the right, not contractual, but the right arrangements to allow people to feel confident in sharing their opinion. But that is a challenge today. And Yuri, you're right. Sometimes you can enter an organization where you realize the minute you walk in, this is not the culture where I can openly share an opinion on what may actually be in the best interest of the organization. Okay? So all of these challenges are challenges I'm sure you're going through as well on different days. I'm glad you haven't said anything about consultants and PowerPoint. But I'm going to come back to...
No, but can I just... Sure. Just quickly, I think this is changing. And it's not just changing because the country is changing and evolving, but it's also because the technology which you're giving to people provides more data, provides more insight, democratizing AI, things which you can actually use. The discussion's becoming less of like it's my opinion versus it's your opinion. The discussion is becoming much more data-driven, much more fact-driven, and this data is available to everyone in the organization. So I think, first of all, I think the cultural things is happening, and a lot of things are getting sort of evolving in this space. But also, you will have a workforce who has much more access to facts and data that will empower them to have much more substantial opinions and perspectives. Yeah, thank you.
And there's another thing here. Sorry, we have
no, it's all right. If we overrun, I won't say anything.
But I think that because it's so much open and transparent, and companies, organizations, people are talking to each other in this country we are. There is a lot of exchange, of cultural exchange, and best practice. So I see something there, I bring it to my company, I share. So we have reached a point where companies that are competing to have the right culture. So it's a very nice area for them also to go and see what is happening, what's happening wrong, what they can, improve, and then they see around to make this better for them. So it's an open conversation. It's not perfect for everyone, okay? This is not a fairy tale. However, we talk more now than we talked 5 years ago, and I love that. And
so it's good to hear that data is suddenly coming out to drive more objective decisions. It's great to see that feedback coming in, people speaking up more. And to your point, that candor is what we need to drive culture for the right behavior. And digital, I'm glad technology is helping. Yeah. It's great that technology is beginning to put metrics in with objectivity in how decisions can be made. And that's one of the things, when you look at cloud, it's undeniable that metrics have helped its growth in the region and not just globally. And we'll come back to that in a minute with you. I've got the final question now, conscious of time as well. Okay. Final question is really building on everything we've discussed. I mean, empowerment is clearly something that all of us, when we walk into a new organization, look for, particularly your point about accountability that links to empowerment. So, Yuri, last question for you then is really one based on the book by Reed Hastings on No Rules Rules, where he talks about his ninth dot in almost the second last chapter or so, where he says, instead of seeking to minimize error through oversight or process, focus on setting clear context, building alignment of the North Star between the boss and the team, and give the informed captain the freedom to decide. Okay? At all levels of the organization, in his view. He's not saying this works for every company, for every culture. They are an 8,600 odd man organization. Some companies are 400,000 odd people, 120 odd thousand people. How do you see this in closing off with your remarks on culture and how the freedom to decide and be accountable is something that is becoming more prevalent with digital?
I think and if I'm mapping it to my industry as well, to financial services, I think it's a combination of both. Because on one side, I still want to have a meaningful set of controls and mechanisms. And controls, I mean effectively rules and processes which are safeguards the environment and safeguard my customers and make sure that that sort of nothing wrong happens security-wise, transactional, et cetera. So I still want to have it, right? And the regulators are rightly asking for that. And the customers actually want that, right? It's not just me. But on the other side, I absolutely agree that, I actually like this philosophy is that I want to give everyone a rope very long to run around freely, but not long enough to hang themselves on it.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the point. And the interesting thing is that, again, it's easier to do in technology. I think I'm definitely living in a better space, and I'm running a technology part of the organization. Mario probably can refer to that as well. It's easy to do in technology because, you can create sandboxes, you can create a meaningfully safe environment. I think Facebook is famous for that, where your teams can actually experiment with live customers, which is wonderful. I wish I had the same ability to do that. But you can create these sandboxes where you let people do stuff differently, and where you set them a direction, and then you effectively, slightly adjust on the corners to get them away from to make sure they stay on the path, but don't sort of control what next step which they do. And from my perspective, for me, it's actually I'm more translating in terms of I don't want to decide vertically in my organization in terms of what will be the next small step everyone does. But I definitely want to align everyone on keep them on the same path and keep them going towards the same goal. Even that.
So you're saying context. You're giving context.
Context, the vision.
Yeah.
I think it's important. I actually use the word vision because I want people to visualize actually where we want to be in 2 years, 3 years, 1 year, etc. But the other thing which is super important for that behavior, which we're sort of slowly getting to, is stop thinking on the 12 months increments. Start thinking about 2, 3, 4 year increments. And theoretically, my job should be thinking about how do we going to run second half of 2021 from a technology perspective. Or 2022 from a technology perspective, not how we're going to do next month, right? And having an ability, this approach, if done properly, would allow me to focus on things which are important in a strategic perspective, while the team can actually do and run on their own going forward.
Okay, well, I won't get into the specialist versus generalist debate there.
No.
Okay, we won't do that. Umar, very, very quickly, and with yourself as well on this question, just to sort of wrap up, what would you say were your perceptions of how freedom of choice is very much ingrained in how we are driving our digital choices ahead of us?
I think it's massively lying as an undercurrent, and it's yet to come to the forefront. I think if you look back at where we were, the world way back when was an agricultural society. We then went from agriculture to factories, and someone decided that they would pay people dollars instead of cents, and that not only revolutionized how people spent, but what they produced and the culture of how people produced and did things, right? We then went on to things like media, TV, radio, print, and that was people were pushing out their ideas. So I was pushing out my idea, mass market to everyone, because I had one idea, one channel. Moving forward, a different idea is leadership. And it's that leadership is being able to inspire people to say, where do you think we need to go? It's a point Yuri made earlier, and I'm a firm believer of this, is that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. It's pointless having a team where you're constantly leading and telling them what to do because you're the ceiling. And again, it comes back to culture, because what I'm seeing is when you ask people for help, or you say to people, hey, Mr. Whatever, I don't understand this part of technology. I don't understand that a little bit. People look at it as weakness. It's not weakness, it's a sign of strength. People say, listen, out of 10 things, I'm really, really good at these 3, but I'm not very good at those 7.
So you're talking about honesty in how you engage.
Absolutely.
And openness.
Yeah.
Openness, transparency, and the ability to actually be brave. And this is what I said earlier, that big organizations, in my experience, don't fail because people are reckless. It's because they're fearful. They're not brave enough to say, hey, I don't get this bit, or I've got this idea. Do you want to come and play with me?
So one of the best people I ever worked with was only 25 years old. She was Chinese, and she basically, on a very regular basis, was so bright, so clever, and so engaged in the work we were doing. And she went on to Harvard, actually, only last year, that she would always tell me and give me feedback, which is an art on its own, and telling me what I could do better with my own role, which I thought was brilliant. I wish more people could do that.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you, Omar. Eleni, big tech at the end. So same question to you, but with a little bit of a reflection on what is your takeaway today as you look at big tech really driving not just the markets, but also the financial landscape and industry landscape for how change and digital come together. What would you say is your takeaway on the freedom of choice of how we can drive culture into our decisions for tomorrow?
I think that the freedom of choice is engraved into the technology companies. And coming from one, I will take it back to the people. I will tell you something we do. And I think it reflects the way that companies also operate, and technology companies. We have what we call vision writing. So now...
Vision writing.
Vision writing. So now I'm writing where I want to be at the end of 31st of December 2021. And I write it as I have been already there. I say, what I achieved in 2021 was 1, 2, 3. And we break these in 3 fields: personal, business, community. And the moment you write it this way, actually, it makes you 46% more probable to do this. And it's not that only that we are writing that, we share that with other people and say, what do you think? Do you think I go well with that? Can you keep me accountable for my vision until the end of the year? And think that you really expose yourself to all the people internally, and this has no, we do that only the people in the lower level or only at the higher level. People share this publicly in our workplace. And this is how we see the vision of a company, the vision of the people.
I think it's brilliant.
And how these things come together. And I've done this for the last 4 years. It changed the way I see myself, not only as part of my family and my community, but also how I see myself in the role I have, in the role I can have and play for a company I work. So this is going back and forth. So people are always at the center, and we can make the difference by giving them the freedom to bring them.
It's funny you should say this, but I know AWS do this as well.
So it's actually started, I actually think it started in, I might be wrong, in Salesforce, where they have lots of interesting things with their sort of Aloha way and everything else which goes there. But I'm not going to go into this. But they have created a lot of interesting tools in that which others adopted later. Right? Actually, I think Amazon is adopted some of this stuff recently.
Exchange of ideas.
Exactly,
and,
so the valley, right? But where you actually publish your goals, publish your vision, not in this way, but in a different way, and make it all through the organization visible, so you can navigate anyone and understand what they're working on, what their goals are. I think it's super important.
Needs and goals have not changed. The way we bring them to reality is what has changed.
So you're almost doing a self-appraisal almost at the beginning of the year. Which is brilliant.
And you make yourself accountable that you want to deliver that. And it can be, I want to lose 5 kg, or I want to make this big difference in this business territory.
I do need to lose 5 kg.
And thank you so much. And I want to be a significant part of my community. You make yourself over there. You expose yourself over there.
Okay, brilliant. Can I just say thank you very much for your comments and your feedback. I know you're all very busy. I do appreciate the time. You've given me some very, very good perspectives, and everyone watching, listening, some great perspectives on culture. It's very clear, though, but we are a bit tired at the end of this year of video calls, and dare I say PowerPoint as well. Okay, I won't ask you what PowerPoint, but change is still constant. And there's no more clearer visualization for Naveed, at least, of how change is so omnipresent this year. As I was looking at, not just because you're here and yourself, Yuri, with cloud, but when I was looking at public cloud services spend on end users globally, there's interesting numbers come out. They say in 2010, the market globally was worth $76 billion US dollars. Suddenly it jumps to $257 billion US dollars in 2020. And guess what? It jumps to $362 billion US dollars in 2021, only a year from now. So you're going to need culture and candor and talent and all those inclusiveness and equity that you were talking about to drive that change. But more so, no, I'm not going to get into the branding and the product that they have to sell. But just another example also is Netflix, where founded in '97, they spent over 20 years to get to 200 million subscribers. Whatever reasons and whatever they did with Star Wars, Disney got there in 2 years almost with 200 million subscribers and users. Okay? So change is constant, and talent is very much going to be key to driving that change. So with that said, culture in all its attributes is definitely going to be part of driving our recovery for all of us next year. So with that, can I just thank you all? Yuri, Eleni, Omar, thank you very much for your time, for taking the time out to be here today to discuss with us what may be intangible for others, but very much is key to how we drive our behavior for everyone next year. So a plug also, if I can make a quick plug for Reed Hastings' book, for those of you who haven't got this book and are bored this Christmas, read the book. It's a great book that reflects on how culture is relevant to how we make our choices tomorrow. And the Netflix culture deck is in there as well in many shapes and forms, and it's definitely worth a read. So with that, can I just thank Capital Club also for hosting us tonight. Thank you very much. To all of you for listening to our live discussion today, thank you as well. Can I just wish you all the very best for the festive season ahead. And until 2021, it's a goodbye from all of us here.